Hola, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, but I heard a rumor that you're off to Italy in a few days.
I am. I'm very, very excited. I've been to Italy before, but I'm going to see a few places that I haven't seen.
That is
Um,
exciting. Are you using
yeah,
lots of data to get your trip prepared?
I'm doing my best. I am, you know me well enough, John, to know that trying to keep track of all of the different food places, historical sites, and all the things I want to see, I've got quite a bit of data resident in probably not the best structure on my iPhone.
Okay, good. Well, that leads right into our conversation today and our guest. We've got Chalakudi from HPE. She's the head of enterprise data analytics. And we're going to talk a little bit about data and the purpose and data with a purpose, basically. So let's bring on Shai.
Great.
How are you,
Hello.
Shai?
Oh,
Hi, Shai.
wonderful, wonderful, Shyamala. How are you doing? Sounds very exciting. Been a while since we talked.
Yeah, it's been a while, and yeah, not as exciting as Ola's trip to Italy, but one of the things that we really want to get right down to is look at there's a lot out there with regards to collection of data, and HPE in fact you generate that's how you generate your revenue is really right is being able to help people store that data. But question for you in a practical sense is how do you help people rationalize what data is truly important and that's going to lead to incremental value that it's worth
Hmm.
storing? And I know that's a big question, but what are your thoughts around that, Shai?
John, you got straight to the heart of the problem there. So before we get too much into the problem, probably let's get a little bit of opine on what is happening. Why is it happening, right? Because unless we know the problem, embrace it, accept it, it's kind of hard to go into the solution. So most organizations do this with a good sense of driving the bottom line growth, right? Because we hear data is the next oil. Data is going to be the bottom line for the company's growth. It's going to become part of your balance sheet. None of that is a false presumption, right? It's very true. So what happens is organically the data gets proliferated in an organization. Let's take a simple example. Maybe Ola, you're going to Italy, I heard, but let me give you a industry experience, right? A simple company, marketing. You have marketing starts off with their important KPI is campaign metrics, correct? So what
Mhm.
do? They take internal data, then they go to social data. They want to know their domain. They want to know their customer. They want to understand what their competition is doing. Wonderful campaign is done. Great success, claim success. Now goes to sales. Sales important KPI is converting your lead to conversion. So what
Yeah.
do? They need the same data for marketing, but they also need internal data and more specific data to sales. The same data now gets expanded in a different way, different form. Now comes the customer experience. You've landed as a customer, John. Now I have to treat you well. I want to know your life cycle. I want to know what my competition is doing. So if you think about it, the first thing I want everyone to kind of opine on and appreciate is we do it with the right intent. How we do it is the nature of the beast. Data explodes, data proliferates. So I think the first thing I would say is accept it, embrace it, because it took me a long time. Ola is laughing here. It took me about 20 years in this field to say, this is the nature. Now I know the nature. Now I know this is what's happening. How do I control it? Right?
Yeah.
So if you think about the first step, I would say, again, going a little bit more on the life cycle of the data, then there are four types of data. The first one is descriptive. What is happening? You always want to know what is happening, right? Very descriptive data. Then you little bit go into diagnostic. Why did it happen?
Yeah.
Right? You want to look at the historical trends. Why did this particular sales dip in this month? Why did this marketing campaign was successful? Why does this customer was very excited about the interaction I had? You want to know why. That's a human nature. You want to get diagnostic data. Now you push yourself to say, okay, I know the description, I know the diagnostic. Let me now get predictive. What is going to happen next? I
Yeah.
want to know. But then comes the ultimate of the whole data insight that we are all going after, right? Is the very much of prescriptive data, giving you a prescription, knowing the description, right? So this is kind of the nature of data in every case if you go look at it. So you kind of go through this life cycle. So how do you do it? If you think about it that way, very simple answer I would say, but very complex to implement, is manage your data lifecycle. Right?
If you're
Every
managing your
organization.
data, so if you're managing your data, I think I understand that cyclical nature because we all live through it. But most organizations, as you said, proliferate data because almost every role that they have within the organization needs data. They have different descriptors that they're trying to predict and analyze and figure out how to project and what to do about it. Is there an overarching methodology or way that organizations should be looking at to say, how do I figure out amongst all this data that's going on out there of how to structure it in a way, or maybe focus on it in a way so that it's not just a big mess of data, but that it actually has relevance to those answers, those answers that I'm looking for in terms of prediction and then, as you said, prescription. What do I do about it?
Yeah. So if you really now look at it different, now that you know this kind of structure, Ola, like you talked about, right? If you can develop a framework. The simple framework could be operational data and analytical data, splitting it into two. And then, of course, comes your predictive data. We'll come to that later because everyone is talking about AI, ML, and let's not forget Gen AI. I mean, we can't do that alone, but we'll get there. The first thing I would say is operational data. Keep your operational data close to its source, right? The example that we just talked about, we said marketing, we talked about sales, we talked about customer experience. They all need internal data. Keep your internal data, operational data close to the source. If you want descriptive data, you want diagnostic data, keep it at your source. Don't take it out of your source, right? Your Salesforce, I'm sure most companies have Salesforce for their sales, they have Marketer for their marketing, wherever it is. If you can control your operational data, because the reason of operational data is also that it has to be timely. You want to know what is happening now, at this minute, at every second. So how do you get that? Keep it close to the source. Do not take it out of your source, because most companies, what they do is they take by the way, I've been in this journey for a long time. So hopefully it's not like I'm preaching, because I'm living the challenges now, is try to keep it close to the source, right? Once you take it out of your source, you've lost control of your data. Each one is going to manipulate it the way they want it. And now they're going to use it for a prescription as well as predictive, as well as diagnostic. You lose control of the data. So as an enterprise data analyst, what I always say is operational data stays at the source. Then we'll come to the analytical data. Yes, John.
Yeah, Shy. So this is a good point. And one of the things, one of my favorite people, Scott Taylor, the data whisperer, they call him on LinkedIn. And he really gets down to the simplicity of think about a retailer and Clorox or Procter & Gamble trying to deal with that retailer, Albertsons. But if they utilize a different code for the store in a different department, all of a sudden the data just explodes and there's a ton of inaccuracy because now all of a sudden it's not flowing through. So isn't some of this related to your idea of keeping it close, but then also making sure you're normalizing so everyone's speaking the same language inside of that data?
Yes, absolutely. Hit the point, right? Most of it, you probably have heard, going back to the example, 80% of the company dollars in data is spent in data management, data wrangling, right? Probably get 20%. The 80-20 rule applies. Very, very good point you're saying. So I think it's important about data definitions, right? As you manage a data life cycle, you have to keep your data definitions very clear, right? You have to have the data autonomy very clearly defined. And the only way, again, to do it, again, my point is keep it at the source. Because if you once take it out of the source, what happens is you give the permission. Again, going back to the business needs we talked about, nobody's doing it out of intention. It's out of need. You give them the permission to go and give their own definitions of data, and you don't want to do that. At least, let's also keep in mind, again, going to the 80-20 rule, probably in most of the situations, 30-40% of the data is internal data. Everything else is external. So let's be real. The only thing you can control more precisely is your internal data. So if you can focus on what you can control, I always say draw the circle, right? What can you control? What can you influence? What can you control is the internal data. And if the internal data, if you can keep your data management lifecycle, if you can define the data definitions, and if you can keep it closer to the source, probably you would have crossed a major hurdle. Then we'll come to the external data, right?
Let me give you a perfect example. So I use a Remarkable, and this is a small sample of the bigger issue, but I use a Remarkable. When I first got it, I was so excited. I was loading in tons of information. I'm taking notes everywhere, but I wasn't classifying any of it. So I wasn't tagging it or titling it or building folders. Well, here's what happened is I have this item, there's a bunch of stuff in it. I have no idea where it is or how to access it. So
Yes.
I've now, over the last 6 months, is now I'm tagging and I'm quantifying and qualifying and putting it into folders, etc., dating stuff so I know it's good or bad or old and getting rid of it. And I think that's a small scale of what's a larger scale. Imagine a business every day just collecting all this information, but then not tagging or classifying it correctly. Is that kind of a good analogy?
Actually, you stole my headline, because my answer to this question is going to be data with a purpose. Again, that's what we're talking about today. I was going to tell you, tag your data. That was going to be my headline, John. I don't think how you read my mind, honestly. I'm like, okay, he stole the thunder. You are absolutely right. Tag your data, define your data, keep it closer to the source. Now, when it comes to analytical data, don't get me wrong. People will ask me, how do I now get history? How do I get trend analysis? Yes, you got to bring it to a common data lake. You got to bring it to a common source. And no question about it. And it is repetition of data. Here, you repeat the data on purpose because it is meant for a purpose. There it was that understanding description. Here it's diagnostic and predictive and prescriptive. So yes, you're defining the data with the source, but as long as you have a common enterprise view of it and not let marketing or sales or customer experience have their own view of it, you at least control the proliferation, because it's bound to happen. That's part of the life cycle of the data. You've got to allow that to happen, because when it comes to descriptive data, you don't need all of the tagging. You only need 10 elements, for example, to tag. Be precise, be good at it. Give them what they want at that point in time. Now bring it to your data lake. You're going to expand your data. You're going to do some analytical on it. You're going to do aggregation. You're going to give them what happened last quarter. You're going to put some KPIs on it so that people can analyze the data and look at it differently. Well said, do it. But again, tag it for the purpose, right? And then keep the data proliferation and the data profiling, what we call in technical terms, that is biggest thing that you do in analytical space. So now when you do both of them combined, at least you control your internal data.
So controlling your data. So controlling your data sounds like one probably common problem that your clients and your customers probably don't do well. Are there another couple of errors that you see often as people try to structure their data? Are there other areas they should watch out for, or other really key success factors around controlling their data? Because I know what you're saying. What you're saying is I need to control it, but that seems like a pretty broad subject. Are there a couple of ways in which we can say these are really big, important ways in which you can control that data?
Yes. No, you hit the point, because if it's been that simple, right, we would have conquered by
We would have all done it.
all done it by now, right? So you're absolutely right. It is easier said than done, right? Why? Because your business needs are changing and the demand is very high on you, right?
Yeah.
For example, I cannot go and tell my marketing department when the next campaign is about in 10 days saying, please hold on, let me create your enterprise strategy. Let me make sure I tag all of your data correctly, that what you need compared to what sales need. And then, so I think you're right. That is why we have to have a proper business prioritization, right? People feel, I think, John, you mentioned you're tagging everything, or that is the nature of human being, right? Because headline says data is the next oil. Headline says data is going to fuel my growth. So what is the natural intent for us is we don't want to lose any data. We think every data is going to be important. So you try to start storing it. So unless you have a governance structure that says, what is my ROI? What is going to be another thing in ROI, what I feel, Ola, what's happening as well is, I think most of us are very good when we start a campaign, when we start a program. Most companies that I'm part of the chain as well, have a very good ROI structure. We define what is going to be the business benefit. But I think what we fail to do is keep in mind data continually drifts. Data becomes redundant over a period of time. What was important for you, John, we talked about it yesterday, may not be important for you a week later. Yeah. Even in your natural thing, when you're collecting data, right? Let us take the photos. Let's take a very personal example, right? You're getting a photo from your family. At that moment, it's very important for you. It becomes your number one thing in maybe your screensaver, or a week later, a month later, that photo becomes a little bit redundant for you, right? It kind of goes back of your memory. Anything for that matter, music, whatever you think. Today you want to watch a movie, this movie Today, the biggest topic in the world is about Gaza. Everyone is talking about Gaza, what's happening, because we all have passion towards it. Same thing happened 3 years ago about COVID. I'm not saying anything is good or bad, but I'm saying COVID was the number one topic, right? So my point is that data has its own life cycle. It becomes redundant. So you have to periodically check, Ola, to your point about the ROI of the business. Check, which we don't do a very good job at as companies, because we are so busy to solving the next problem. It's very hard for us to go back to what we've already solved. So I think you've got to do it systematically. You've got to ensure that you have periodic checks along the way and say, is my data still giving me the ROI I need? And I trust me, you will find redundant data that you should have the courage to delete or to archive it, right? Effectively.
Well, Shai, I think this also brings up another point, and Ola, I'd love your opinion on this as well, is this is a little bit related to security as well, right? Because at the end of the day, is every piece of data you collect and store has a security risk, and some things are less valuable than others, but storing things that aren't necessary over time could be a security risk. I mean, this is history books, but think of Watergate, right? That was storing information that wasn't necessarily necessary, and then caused an issue. So, Shai, how do you weigh in on helping people make sure there's governance around security? And Ola, I wanted to hear your opinion too. After that, is how our clients are thinking about that.
No, you hit close to the heart, John. September alone, I'm a data person, so I'll give you some statistics. September alone, September 2023, which is probably a month ago, we had 71 publicly disclosed security violations. 71. Highest. Grows exponentially. And the cost of that is going to be about 4.5 billion.
Wow.
Right, for the industry. So to your point, security risk is not only your brand reputation, definitely, right? You don't want to be the headlines of any. That's the one thing I always tell my team when they define any coming to the solution, right? You don't want to be the headlines with the security violation. So what do you do to prevent that? Again, when your data proliferates, going back to my point, keep it close to the source, right? Data hygiene. Once you let the data go out, you lose control. When you lose control, it's very hard for you to put security governance on it, right? So security principles of defining your data solution should be the number one architectural principles as you define. We talked about ROI. Security is equally important, right? How do you wall garden your data? How do you protect your data? This is, I don't want to get too technical, but this is where it comes about where do you store your data, right? There's data at store, data in motion. Both of them have security risks. Let us keep the motion aside, but data at store. You store in public cloud. You store in private cloud. What is it? What is the nature of the public cloud? What kind? Going back again to tagging of the data, John, right? Certain data doesn't have to be protected, but certain data, PII data, have to be protected. And then there are also regulations with each regions, right? For example, in China, you have to, if they say you have to forget your data, you have to forget the entire data. Recent California law, or in China says, I want to keep data within my own region, don't take it out of my region. So to your point, I think as you define these principles, security should be bigger part of your exercise as well.
I love it. Ola, what are your thoughts on this? What are our clients dealing with on this area of data and security?
I mean, I think Shai said on a couple of really important things that most of our clients would talk about. One is there's a proliferation of data. Look, it's just like pictures on your iPhone. Today, you take 7 of the same thing, 7 pictures of the same thing. You're not really even conscious of the fact that you don't need all 7 pictures. You land on, photo 6 and say, that's the one I want to keep. But do you ever really get rid of the other photos? Chances are no. So you end up with this just proliferation of pictures. The same thing happens with data. Here's a really important key, though. What we have in terms of data is all data needs to be classified. Some of it's private, meaning that I literally have regulation and laws that says I can't allow it to go beyond, a certain level of responsibility. I've got other data that's just very sensitive. I don't want my client list to go out to my competitors. So I need to classify my data, and I need to make sure that the people in my organization understand the classification of the data that they're using day in and day out, so that they have a sense of responsibility and accountability to how I've classified that data. Structuring the data, as Shai said, has lots of different implications because it all depends on its classification. I may store and secure my private data far differently than I do data that doesn't have any kind of level of sensitivity to it, or is, let's just say, public data. So I think most organizations recognize they need a master data management policy and practice to be able to structure their data and use their data appropriately. I think their biggest struggle is there's so much data that's already in their environment. Many of them don't even know where to start. Where do I start? Like, what's the first thing I do? Well, you can take it from the perspective of potentially, I better go secure my private data because I've got either a legal responsibility or a fiduciary responsibility to keep it private. And then maybe I start looking at my sensitive data. What's the data I don't want to get out? And perhaps if we take an actual structuring of our data in a methodical way, because it seems so overwhelming, it'd be like me, John, trying to look at all the photos I've taken on my phone in the last 2 years and saying, what do I do when I run out of storage? Because now I have no choice. I have to go through all of my pictures because I didn't classify them. So I can't quickly say, where are the pictures now? So what's starting to happen within most, phones that I think is going to help us a lot with this problem in data is that most of our phone providers in their operating systems have an AI that starts to automatically try to classify your photos. So now think of the power of these sorts of technologies when I have giant, massive data lakes and I'm trying to classify that data. So I do think that there's technological emerging things that will help us. But the number one thing we got to do is have a framework for how are we going to go do this. And it probably starts with some level of classification. What's the private data? Let me go make sure I take and secure that. What's the sensitive data? Let me make sure I look at and secure that. And then kind of the rest of it's just all those extra photos I took. And, hopefully I can get that down as Shai said and rationalize it. But I think, Shai, I don't know your thinking on the subject, but it feels like to me that's a practical way. But most clients are like, just where do I start?
No, I think you said it beautifully. And a little bit of again, data and myth here, right, is I think the cost of data storage went down so drastically, right? If you think about it, I think 1 terabyte of memory in 1950s when IBM first introduced it was costing us about 100 trillion, believe it or not. Now it's less than 10K.
Wow.
Less than 10K, right? So I think the idea of the storage going down created a myth saying I can store everything, right? That's it, like you're saying about the human private. If you think about your own data that you're not able to make decisions, think about companies' data, how hard it's going to make a decision. So again, I always say embrace the problem. So it is a very, very factual problem. And you said starting it right is inventory of your data, right? So you not only going onward, you should have it, but you have to have inventory data. And you're right, not getting too technical, we have a lot of bots, what we call it nowadays, right? It's automation bots. Go and look into your data, not only tagging them, but have the courage to archive them. I'm not even saying delete them because deleting data is a big no-no, right? What if I need it? At least archive it, right? And what I do with my team is archive the data, leave it out there, and we have life cycle. Again, we have the timeline, right? If the data is latent for more than 3 months, certain data to your point can be deleted. More than 6 months, delete them. More than a year, delete them, right? But we have cold storage and hard storage and all of that, getting to the technical to your point. Well, but start with the data that you can control. And again, go ahead and tag them, but you have to have an inventory of your data. You got to know where your data lies and what is the type of data, to your point, that lies around. So that's very important that we have to take a checkpoint. It is quite an audience exercise. It's not a simple one, to Ola's point, because we've grown rapidly. It is mind-boggling, but we got to do it. And then control the bleeding. What you said, Ola, right? Every decision you make it, again, data-driven decision. Is this data required for you? Is it going to be required? The one question that I also have a checklist with my thing that I always ask is, would you need this data after 6 months? We didn't know to ask that question probably a year ago. We didn't have a framework. Don't get me wrong. But the framework is evolving because we are learning, right? So now we have a question saying, would you need this data after, or is it only for this campaign? If it's only for this campaign, it's going to go away. If it's only for this particular sales, you want to understand this prediction, it's going to go away. Let us make the decision today when I'm defining your solution. We were not that adamant or that clear probably a year ago because the cost was very cheap. We assumed this is going to be a no-brainer.
Shai, this reminds me of storage units, and I wish I had invested in them in the 1980s, because people store the old couch for $99 a month, and 2 years later they spent more than it would have cost to buy a new couch, and it feels similar. Is that just because the cost went down doesn't mean that there's a purpose for storing. Let me shift gears here for a second, because I think this is important as we get. I want to make sure we have enough time for this quickly. Is if I had to think about now, we've solved all the world trouble with regards to storing too much data. Now we bring in Gen AI and LLMs, large language modeling. Shai, what are 3 things an organization can do to prep themselves for this? Because to me, it feels like, oh my God, we're just about to exponentially buy 5,000 storage units. So what do we do here?
Yeah, you're hitting the point of LLMs, right? I just usually joke, John or Ola, every time anyone had said LLM or Gen AI or Chat GPT, only if you had put $1 in, going back to your storage unit analogy, I think we'd all be millionaires by now, right? If you think about a year ago, when OpenAI introduced the Chat GPT, it's become kind of the new thing. But it's got definitely value in it, right? It's not. I'm sure if you go look back on blockchain about probably 2011, there was a big thing, and then it became twinning. Twinning was the next big thing. I think this is also will have a place. It's going high in its fame. It will settle down, but I don't think it's going to go away, because it has its place in the world of data. Because humans are curious. We want to know everything, and we have lost patience. I want to know now. I want to know immediately what's going to happen with whatever is predicted is going to happen, right? So I think it's going to find its place. But the question then becomes, if you think about what is LLM, again, this is by the way also my research subject. So let me apply my academic hat a little bit. Let's define what LLM is. Large language model. What does it mean? It means that it is being trained on almost all of the digital data available in the internet. That is what the power of LLM is. Think about crowdsourcing. If I had to know something, I go to Google search engine, I get the information. It's from that corpus. But now, if the entire digital data available in the world can answer my question, then I've got the power of the entire knowledge. That is what LLM is all about, right? It is about training on the available public digital data to give you the power of knowledge, what you want to do. So if you think about it that way, it's all about data compute and consumption. So if you think I'm going to use, then comes a conundrum for you. Can I use it for enterprise? But then it comes to the point of hallucinations. It may not be accurate. You have to think about, is it accurate enough for me to put my tag on it? And then comes your ethical principle, right? Every company have AI ethics, and this violates, probably you've seen the amount of noise it's generating or the truth it's generating. Either way you can go on the ethical principle, because it's used your data, John. You would have written something. Ola talked about her photos. She might have put that photos on Facebook. That image is now being used to train the image recognition models that can now predict and create. You just do a sketch today, it will create an image for you, right? You put a photo today, it will tell you what's happening in the photo, right? How is it able to do it? It's from the images the 7 pictures that Ola took. Now it has a worth, Ola, because everything has a pixel. Mm-hmm. Somebody's using your 7 pictures to get the value out of it. That's how it is being done. So now the question then comes to you, the conundrum comes to you is, we use a public LLMs, and then the new terminology right now is private LLMs, right? Going back about security and sensitivity and all of that. So that's a big conundrum. So my suggestion always has been is, you got to create, again, a little bit technical here, so forgive me, but you got to have a common orchestration layer, right? But don't fool yourself. This is what's happening with most of my discussions with my network and all of that is, hey, I can keep changing these models in the background. I'm going to have a common layer, but I can change the models. I think it's a little bit of a myth there. The reason is that your LLMs, the biggest life cycle of an LLM is training your data. This also comes to ESG that we didn't talk about quite, John. You are contributing to the ESG negativity, right, on the whole subject, because you're training your data, you're computing it. But let us not forget that the whole purpose is to train the data. That's the biggest life cycle of LLM. So don't have a myth you can replace the models as you grow. So yes, have a common orchestration layer. I would always say, in simple terms, Lego blocks. Create your compostable architecture in Lego blocks so you can replace the blocks, but don't have a myth. You can replace the model and put plug in, and the life is going to be good. That is the most expensive part of your life cycle. So choose what you want for public, like summarization. I want to look at something and summarize it for me. You need that strength of the corpus. So use that public for it. But you want answer to a specific RFP for your organization. Use your private data, right?
Yeah.
I think, again, it goes back, Ola, like you said, know the purpose, understand the security concerns you are, take on the broader shoulder of ESG, because I think we may say that we're only contributing 2 to 3% in ESG when it comes to company,
yes.
but don't forget, 77% of toxic waste is from our industry of compute, right?
Wow.
So don't forget. So you got to keep that balance, is what I would say, John, if it helps.
Well, Shai, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you
It has.
so much. And the good news here is I think HPE is going to be fine with regards to selling more units, because there's obviously a lot
Responsibly, though. Responsibly, though. That's one of the key word. If you look at what we have been saying, is we'll make sure we advise our customer to responsibly store data and to make the best of it. Again, data with a purpose, right? Tag your data with a purpose. I think you kind of, those are the taglines, I would say, John.
Thank you so much, Shai.
Great.
Be good.
Thank you very much, Shai.
Thank you.
Ola, wow, this has been what a topic, huh?
It's mind-boggling is what kept coming to my head, because we all kind of understand the problem, and we have it even in our own little private lives. Me going to Italy with a whole lot of data, and now I have no idea where to eat because I have so much food and restaurants in my database that, yeah, maybe I need an AI, John.
I think you do. I think you need a small LLM for your trip. That would be amazing.
There you go.
Look, at this is great, and data with a purpose is and we mentioned at the end, which I thought was great, is there is an environmental piece to this and a social piece to this that we have to be conscious of. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start to delete 6 of the 7 photos that are the same, and that should probably have a very positive impact to the global environment. So good to see you. Have a wonderful time in Italy, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. See you soon, John. Bye.
Bye bye.